The heat in downtown Atlanta was blinding that afternoon, so bright it turned everything the same color, except her. Aisha Brooke, a black nurse, still in scrubs, after a 14-hour shift, knelt beside an elderly white woman who had just collapsed near the fountain. She was saving a life when the siren of authority arrived. Gun drawn, eyes already decided, hands where I can see them. The crowd froze. Phones lifted, and in the space between heartbeat and breath, the world showed its oldest reflex, where color speaks louder than truth. He slammed her to the ground, knee on her back, badge gleaming in the sun. But what he didn't know, what no one in that square could have guessed, was who her brother was, and how that one mistake was about to shake the system from the inside out. If you believe justice looks different, depending on who's holding the badge, stay till the end, because this isn't just about one arrest. It's about the moment America stopped pretending it didn't see. She saw the woman collapse before anyone else did. 1 second, Ruth Chambers was smiling near the fountain, white hair glowing like thread in the sun. The next, her knees buckled, and she went down hard on the stone. The sound was small, just a thud, but it tore through Aisha like an alarm. Her body moved before her mind caught up. Bag down, phone out, she pushed through the ring of startled onlookers and knelt beside the woman. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" she asked, pressing 2 fingers to the old woman's neck. The pulse fluttered, faint and frightened. Aisha's voice softened automatically, the way nurses learn to do after years of trying to calm pain. "You're gonna be all right, Mrs." She glanced at the handbag. "Chambers. Ruth Chambers. You just hold still, okay?" Ruth tried to speak but only gasped. Aisha loosened her scarf, turned her slightly to keep the airway clear, and reached for her phone to dial emergency services. That's when the shout came hard, masculine, echoing off glass and steel. "Hands where I can see them." Aisha looked up, startled, phone still in her palm. A white officer strode toward her, hand hovering near his holster. His badge caught the sunlight. Officer Cole Hendrick. The crowd's chatter died instantly. Aisha blinked, unsure what she'd done wrong. "Sir, I'm a nurse," she said, raising her free hand slowly. This woman collapsed. "Drop the phone," Hendrick barked. "It's my phone," she said, confused. "I'm calling." He lunged before she could finish, knocking it from her grasp. It cracked against the pavement. The sound sliced the silence clean in two. Somewhere behind her, someone whispered, "She's trying to help." "Back up," Hendrick shouted at the bystanders. Then, to Aisha, "Turn around, hands behind your back." "What?" "I haven't done anything." "You fit a description," he snapped. Aisha's breath hitched. Her eyes darted to Ruth, still half-conscious beside her. "Please. She needs medical. Now." When he grabbed her arm, the pain made her gasp. He twisted it up behind her, pushing her forward till her face nearly hit the stone. Her ID swung from her lanyard, the red cross clear as daylight. "I said I'm a nurse," she cried. "Stop resisting," Hendrick yelled. "I'm not resisting." The pressure on her shoulder grew, grinding bone against tendon. She felt her elbow pop, heard herself cry out. Gasps rippled through the square. The crowd swelled but held back. Phones lifted, recording, some hands trembling, but no one stepped forward. The air thickened with fear and shame. "Officer," someone shouted. "She didn't do anything." Hendrick ignored them. His knee pressed into her back, pinning her. "You people never learn," he muttered, low enough that only she heard it. Those 4 words burned hotter than the sun above them. Aisha froze, not from the weight, but from the tone. She'd heard it before, in hospitals, in hallways, in 1,000 smaller ways. The same quiet poison hidden under authority. The same assumption that her skin came before her story. Blood ran from a scrape on her cheek, mixing with the heat and grit of the pavement. Her breath came ragged, choked by humiliation more than pain. Ruth stirred weakly beside her. She helped me," the old woman whispered. "She didn't do Ma'am, stay still. Hendrik barked, not even looking at her. The crowd shifted, restless now. Somebody call internal affairs. A man yelled, "She's a nurse." Hendrik yanked the cuffs tight until the metal bit into her wrists. Aisha winced, but said nothing. Somewhere in the crowd, a young girl began to cry. A car horn blared in the distance. Life outside the circle continued, but inside it, time had stopped. Aisha stared at the ground, forcing herself not to scream. She'd spent her whole life teaching others to breathe through panic, through pain. Now she repeated her own instructions. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Stay alive long enough to be heard. Then, from across the square, a voice cut through the chaos. Deep, steady, familiar. "Officer, let her go." Hendrik turned sharply. A tall, black man in a gray suit stood at the edge of the crowd, his eyes locked on the scene. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. The authority in his tone made the crowd quiet again. "Who are you?" Hendrik demanded. The man's voice stayed calm. "The one you should have listened to before putting your hands on her." Aisha blinked through tears. "Isaac," she whispered, but her brother, Isaac Brooke, was already walking toward them. Every step measured. The square seemed to hold its breath. And in that moment, before anyone knew his name, his title, or how far this would go, the city of Atlanta stood balanced on a knife's edge, between what it had always been and what it might finally become. For a moment, the crowd seemed to forget how to breathe. Isaac Brooks' voice carried the kind of calm that made chaos hesitate. He didn't raise it. He didn't need to. His presence alone drew a line the officer hadn't expected to cross. The sunlight glinted off his cufflinks, his gray suit, immaculate, despite the heat. And for a fleeting second, it wasn't just a man approaching, it was dignity walking straight into danger. "Sir, step back," Officer Hendrik barked, his tone wavering between command and uncertainty. "This is an active arrest." Isaac didn't flinch. "An arrest? For helping a woman who collapsed?" He gestured toward Ruth Chambers, still trembling on the ground. "You can barely stand, ma'am. Tell him what happened." Ruth opened her mouth, but Hendrik's voice cut her off. "Stay back, sir. Don't interfere." Isaac took another slow step forward, every movement deliberate. "My name is Isaac Brooke. I'm a federal attorney with the Department of Justice. You are detaining my sister, a licensed trauma nurse, without probable cause and in full public view." The crowd rippled with murmurs. The words "federal attorney" sliced through the humid air. Hendrik blinked, caught off guard. His grip on Aisha's arm faltered just slightly. "You her brother?" he asked, voice hardening to cover his unease. "Yes," Isaac said simply, "and I'm asking you, Officer Hendrik, to release her immediately." But pride is a stubborn flame. Hendrik's jaw tightened. He looked around at the faces, the cameras, the judgment pressing in from every direction. "Back away," he ordered, hand brushing the butt of his holstered gun. "You people think you can just walk in and take charge, don't you?" Aisha turned her head, pain and disbelief in her eyes. "Isaac, please," she whispered, voice small from exhaustion and fear. Her cheek was scraped raw, her wrists cuffed tight enough to leave bruises. "He'll make it worse." Her brother's gaze softened for just a heartbeat. "No, Aisha," he said quietly. He already had. Then, turning back to Hendrik, he spoke evenly, the way men do when they've learned that anger gives power to the wrong hands. "Officer, you are making a critical mistake. You're being recorded from at least 10 angles. Every word you say and every action you take will be reviewed. Walk this back before you ruin your career." The crowd could feel the shift. Some whispered Isaac's title, others began filming closer. Ruth tried to rise, clutching her chest. "He's right," she rasped. "She was helping me. Please, stop this." Hendrik's face reddened. "You don't tell me how to do my job," he snapped. "Everyone says they're innocent when they're caught." "Caught?" Isaac repeated, his tone razor sharp. "Caught doing what?" "Saving a life." He took another step forward. Hendrik reacted instinctively, shoving him back. The crowd gasped. Aisha cried out. The cameras caught it all. The aggression, the imbalance, the ugly flash of power colliding with control. In a single, measured motion, Isaac steadied himself. He didn't strike back. He simply looked Hendrik in the eye and said, "That's assault, officer. And you just did it to a federal prosecutor in front of witnesses." The silence that followed was so complete, even the saxophonist had stopped playing. Hendrik froze, his pulse visible in his throat. The color drained from his face, replaced by something else. Fear disguised as fury. He lunged forward again, trying to reassert authority. But this time Isaac caught his wrist midair, redirecting it in a controlled defensive hold, just enough to send the officer stumbling onto one knee. A collective sound rose from the crowd, half shock, half relief. Hendrik hit the ground hard, stunned but unhurt. Isaac released him immediately, hands raised. "No one touched you in anger," he said firmly. "You fell because you lost your balance, not your power. But power, once threatened, always seeks revenge." The radios on nearby belts crackled to life. "Unit 12 requesting backup, officer down." Within seconds, the wail of sirens drowned out every other sound. Aisha's heart dropped. She struggled to sit up as Hendrik climbed to his feet, face contorted with humiliation. "You're under arrest," he hissed. Isaac didn't move. "You can try." Police vehicles screeched to a halt along the curb, tires spitting dust. More officers poured into the square, guns drawn, shouting conflicting orders. The crowd scattered to the edges, phones trembling in their hands. Ruth Chambers clutched her chest and began to sob. Aisha wanted to scream that it was all wrong, that her brother wasn't a threat, that he'd done nothing but stand tall. But her voice failed her. The cuffs bit deeper into her skin. All she could do was watch as the officers surrounded them. One voice rose above the chaos, sharp, authoritative, female. "Stand down." The command sliced through the panic. Sergeant Olivia Shaw strode into view, her expression carved from stone. Her eyes darted between the scene, the nurse on the ground, the shaken crowd, the officer with dust on his knees, and the man in the suit who looked like he carried entire laws in his spine. "What's happening here?" she demanded. No one spoke. The square held its breath again, and in that suspended moment, Atlanta felt like the whole world had stopped to decide whose truth it would believe, hers, his, or the one the system had already written before any of them ever spoke. The square stayed eerily silent as Sergeant Olivia Shaw stepped closer, her boots clicking against the pavement. Every eye followed her, desperate to see which side she'd fall on. The heat shimmered between the figures like a mirage, between the uniform that held power and the truth that lay bleeding on the ground. Hendrik's voice broke first, shaky but defiant. "Sergeant, he attacked me, threw me to the ground in front of witnesses." He gestured toward Isaac, who stood motionless, his hands raised in quiet control. That man resisted lawful orders. Sergeant Shaw looked him over once, then shifted her gaze to Aisha, still cuffed on the concrete, her cheek swollen and streaked with blood, her scrubs darkened by dust. The ID badge on her chest glinted in the sunlight. Olivia's jaw clenched. "Uncuff her," she ordered. Hendrik hesitated, his mouth twitching. "But now," she said again, lower, sharper. The sound of metal opening felt louder than the sirens that still echoed in the distance. Aisha's hands fell free, trembling as she held them to her chest. Olivia crouched beside her. "You okay, ma'am?" Aisha nodded weakly, too stunned to speak. Isaac stepped forward, but two officers intercepted him. "Sir, you're under arrest for obstruction and assault." The words came flat, rehearsed, automatic. Isaac didn't resist. He simply looked at Sergeant Shaw and said, "Record everything. The truth will outlive this moment." They cuffed him too, pressing his wrists together behind his back. Aisha's voice cracked, raw and small. "Please don't. He didn't do anything. He's my brother." Olivia hesitated, caught between duty and shame. Ma'am, I need you to step aside. Aisha stared at her, tears streaking the dust on her face. You wear that badge. Does it feel heavy yet? Olivia's eyes flickered. She turned away, ordering the officers to move. The crowd, once frozen, began to murmur in disbelief. Cameras followed as Isaac was led toward the patrol car, his composure unbroken, his gaze fixed ahead. He's not the one who should be in cuffs, someone shouted, but the sirens swallowed every voice as the doors slammed and the vehicles pulled away. At the precinct, the fluorescent lights hummed with the same indifference as the system itself. They booked him like any other suspect. Photographs, fingerprints, forms filled out by officers who refused to meet his eyes. One of them muttered, "This'll look bad when it comes out." Another whispered, "He's a federal attorney, right?" "Doesn't matter," the first one said quietly. "Today, he's just another black man in cuffs." Meanwhile, back at the square, Aisha sat on the curb beside Ruth Chambers, who refused to leave her side. "I told them you were helping me," Ruth kept repeating. "I told them." Her voice trembled, guilt woven through every word. Aisha nodded, holding her arm. "It's not your fault, Mrs. Chambers. This isn't new." She stared down the street where the squad cars had vanished. "It's just recorded this time." At the station, Olivia arrived moments later, her face tight with something between anger and regret. She found Hendrik in the hallway, pacing, chest puffed out like a man desperate to feel right again. "You crossed a line today," she said. "He assaulted me." Hendrik shot back. "He put hands on me in front of civilians." "After you shoved his sister into the ground?" she asked, voice cool but deadly. "After you ignored witnesses and detained a medical professional on duty?" Hendrik faltered. "He fit a description," he muttered weakly. Olivia's eyes hardened. "That's the problem. You didn't see a nurse. You saw a threat." Without another word, she brushed past him and entered the holding area. Isaac sat on the bench, calm as stone, cuffs still on. "Mr. Brooke," she said, quieter now, "do you need medical attention?" "No, Sergeant," he replied, "just honesty." The words hit harder than any accusation. She exhaled slowly, then unlocked his cuffs herself. "You'll be processed, but you'll be heard." Isaac stood, rolling his sore wrists. "He hit my sister while she was saving a life. That's not law enforcement. That's ego with a gun." Olivia swallowed hard. "I know." She hesitated, then added, "You'll have your statement on record. And Mr. Brooke, I'll make sure it doesn't disappear." Outside, night began to fall. The news vans gathered like vultures, cameras flashing, headlines forming before truth had time to breathe. Black nurse assaulted by officer in public. Federal attorney detained after defending sister. The city buzzed, restless, divided. Some saw heroes, others saw provocation. But inside the station, there was only quiet, the kind that follows when everyone realizes something irreversible has been caught on tape. Aisha waited by the glass doors, eyes red but steady. When Isaac finally stepped out, she ran into his arms, trembling. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. "They could have—" "I couldn't not," he said. "If we don't stand for each other, who will?" Ruth approached, clutching her cane. "I called the local paper," she said. "They're sending someone in the morning. People need to know what really happened." Isaac nodded solemnly. "They will, but truth comes slow, justice slower." As they walked into the warm night, the flashing lights reflected off the wet pavement like ghosts of a city's conscience. And though Aisha's body ached, something inside her burned bright again. Not hope exactly, but defiance, fierce and unbroken. The walls of the holding cell were the color of wet concrete, cold and indifferent. Isaac sat on the narrow bench, his suit wrinkled, his wrists bruised where the cuffs had dug in. The sound of a buzzing light overhead filled the silence, broken only by the muffled chatter of officers outside. He had spent his career fighting for people who never got this far, men and women whose names were forgotten before the ink on their paperwork dried. Now he was one of them, waiting under the same flickering bulb, breathing the same recycled air. Justice, he thought, always costs more for the people who believe in it. Aisha sat in the hallway of the precinct, a blanket around her shoulders, staring through the glass window that separated her from the booking area. Her eyes followed every movement of her brother behind that door. She wanted to storm in, to demand they release him, to scream until someone listened, but her throat felt raw, her strength hollowed out. Sergeant Olivia Shaw approached quietly and handed her a cup of water. "You should go home, Miss Brooke," she said softly. "You've been through enough." Aisha's fingers tightened around the cup. "You think going home fixes this?" Olivia hesitated, guilt heavy in her gaze. "It's not fair," she murmured, "but I'll do what I can." Inside the holding room, Isaac's thoughts drifted to their father, a teacher from Montgomery who used to tell them that the law was a mirror cracked in places, but worth polishing. He had believed in it with a stubborn kind of faith. Isaac had built his career trying to prove his father right. But now, sitting in that cell, he wondered if the mirror ever showed people like him clearly at all. The door opened, and an officer entered with a clipboard. He was young, uncertain, his badge still shining like it hadn't yet been tested. "Miss Brooke," he began, eyes flicking nervously between the paper and the man in the suit. "We need your statement." Isaac studied him for a long moment, then said, "Before I speak, you'll need to decide whether you want the truth or the version that keeps your department comfortable." The officer swallowed, unsure how to answer. Just tell me what happened, sir." Isaac leaned forward, his tone even. "Your colleague attacked my sister. She was helping a civilian, and he saw danger instead of duty. You arrested me because I reminded him that the law doesn't bend to ego." The officer's pen trembled as he wrote. Minutes later, Sergeant Shaw entered, her expression tight. "Mr. Brooke," she said, "you've been formally cleared of assault. You'll still need to stay until Internal Affairs reviews the footage." Isaac nodded slowly. "And Hendrik," she sighed, "he's been placed on leave." "It's temporary until they determine cause." Isaac gave a humorless laugh. "Temporary," he repeated. "That's the word this system uses when it wants time to forget." Aisha rose as the door opened, rushing to her brother's side. The bruises on his wrists made her chest ache. "They had no right," she whispered. "You did nothing wrong." Isaac touched her shoulder. "Neither did you, but that's never been enough." His voice was calm, but his eyes carried the quiet exhaustion of generations. Sergeant Shaw stood watching them, something breaking quietly behind her eyes. "You know," she said, "when I joined the force, I told myself I could change things from the inside. Days like this make that feel like a lie." Isaac met her gaze. "It's not a lie, Sergeant. It's a burden, but someone has to carry it." In the distance, the precinct phones began to ring. First one, then several. Olivia turned toward the sound. A dispatcher hurried over, whispering, "Ma'am, the footage has gone viral. News outlets are picking it up. They're asking for statements." A wave of unease spread through the room. Hendrik, sitting in a nearby office, heard it too, his face drained of color. "They can't," he muttered. "That footage doesn't show the whole story." Olivia looked at him sharply. "It shows enough." By nightfall, the city outside began to stir. Reporters stood on the courthouse steps, voices carried by the wind. The streets near the precinct filled with people holding candles instead of signs, the kind of quiet protest that speaks louder than shouting. Aisha and Isaac stood at the window, side by side, watching the glow ripple through the night. "They're not out there for us," Aisha said softly. "They're out there for what keeps happening." Isaac nodded. "That's the only way change starts, when the story stops being about two people and starts being about everyone." Sergeant Shaw walked up behind them. "Mr. Brooke, you're free to go," she said, voice steady but softer now. "The DOJ's been notified. They'll handle this." Isaac turned, meeting her eyes. "Sergeant, the badge you wear, it's supposed to protect, not prove power. Remember that when they start looking for someone to blame." She held his gaze for a long moment before replying, "I already do." As they stepped out into the cool night, Aisha breathed in the city air. It smelled like rain and metal and something else. Hope, faint but real. Flashing lights from news vans painted the street in blue and red, reflections dancing across her bruised skin. She looked up at her brother, who had been silent for several blocks. "You think this will change anything?" she asked quietly. Isaac's reply came after a pause, his tone low but certain. "It has to, because if it doesn't, what's the point of all the laws we've written in ink when the truth keeps being written in blood?" The wind picked up, carrying the faint echo of chanting from the courthouse steps. Somewhere behind them, an officer lowered his head, as if realizing too late what he'd become part of, and for the first time that day, the city didn't feel asleep, it felt like it was waking up. The morning light over Atlanta was dim and uncertain, as if even the sun hesitated to rise after what had unfolded the night before. The courthouse steps were already crowded, reporters, nurses still in scrubs, college students holding cardboard signs that read "Justice for Aisha" and "Accountability for all." Their voices blended into a low hum that rolled through the streets, a mix of anger, grief, and something new. Aisha watched it all from a bench across the street, her arms still in a sling. Every muscle in her body ached, but she refused to look away. "You should be resting," Isaac said, standing beside her, his tie loosened, the exhaustion behind his eyes too deep to hide. She shook her head. "If I rest now, they'll write the ending for us." The doors of the courthouse opened, and Sergeant Olivia Shaw stepped out. The crowd quieted as she faced the microphones. "Effective immediately," she said. "Officer Cole Hendrick has been charged with assault and falsifying a police report. Internal Affairs and the Department of Justice have opened a joint investigation." Murmurs surged like a wave. Aisha felt tears blur her vision. For a fleeting moment, it sounded like justice had learned to speak her name. But deep down, she knew the fight didn't end with a statement. It only began there. Isaac placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You did this," he whispered. "You stood your ground." She shook her head. "No, we did. And all those people who recorded, who spoke, who didn't let it vanish." She glanced at the crowd, seeing faces of every color, all watching together. For once, the silence between them wasn't fear, it was solidarity. Across the plaza, Hendrick was led through the side doors, escorted by 2 officers. His face was pale, eyes darting between the cameras and the people who had once looked away. For the first time, he looked small, not because of his uniform, but because he could no longer hide behind it. Olivia's gaze followed him, her jaw tight. She turned back toward Isaac and Aisha, nodding once, a gesture that carried apology and respect in equal measure. Later that afternoon, inside a quiet hospital room, Aisha changed out of her torn scrubs and into her uniform again. Her coworkers had insisted she take time off, but she couldn't. Healing, for her, wasn't rest, it was return. She pinned her badge to her chest with trembling fingers. The bruises on her face had darkened, but her eyes burned with steady purpose. A young patient watched her from his bed. "You're the nurse from the news," he said shyly. She smiled faintly. "Guess so. Were you scared?" he asked. Aisha paused, thinking. "Yes, but fear only wins if you let it stop you." Isaac waited outside her room, reading from his phone emails, statements, interviews. The story had already spread beyond Georgia. Civil rights lawyers, senators, even the Attorney General had commented. "This could change policy," one reporter said. Isaac wasn't sure he believed in change anymore, but he believed in truth, and that was something worth protecting. When Aisha stepped into the hall, he looked up and smiled faintly. "Back to work already?" She nodded. "People still need care. The world doesn't stop because I got hurt." He studied her for a moment. "You sound like Dad." He'd say the same thing, wouldn't he? She replied softly. "Keep showing up until the system can't pretend not to see you." Outside the hospital, the city was restless but alive. Candlelight vigils flickered at intersections, not in anger but in remembrance. Strangers nodded to each other on the sidewalks. Some stopped Aisha to thank her, others to apologize for a world that made courage necessary. Each word felt heavy, but she carried them all. As evening fell, she and Isaac walked through Centennial Square, the same place it had all begun. The fountain still ran, glittering under the streetlights. Ruth Chambers sat nearby on a bench, cane across her knees, waving when she saw them. "You two made history," she said, her smile tired but proud. "I only did what anyone should have done," Aisha replied. Ruth shook her head. "That's the thing, dear. Most people don't." They sat together in the quiet, the air humming with distant chants and the hum of traffic. For a long while, none of them spoke. Then Isaac said, almost to himself, "Justice isn't the verdict, it's the lesson that lingers." Aisha leaned her head against his shoulder. "You think people will remember?" He glanced at her. "They'll remember you, and that's enough to start something." Across the plaza, a little girl let go of her mother's hand and placed a single flower where Aisha had fallen days ago. It was a small act, easily missed in a city of millions, but Aisha saw it, and for the first time since that terrible day, she let herself breathe without fear. The night wind swept through the square, carrying away the echoes of sirens and shouts, leaving behind only the sound of running water and the quiet pulse of a city learning how to see. In that silence, something shifted, not a revolution, not a miracle, but a reckoning long overdue. And as they rose to leave, Isaac looked back once more at the fountain's reflection of his sister's face, bruised, strong, unbroken, and thought, sometimes justice doesn't roar, sometimes it just keeps standing. If this story hit you in the heart, don't just scroll past, hit like for everyone who's ever been judged before they were heard, and share it so the world remembers what silence costs. Subscribe if you believe one voice can still change a system built to ignore it. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you saw it happen right in front of you? Would you step in, or would you freeze like the crowd did that day? Your answer might say more about justice than any courtroom ever could.